All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful forces in all of our lives, money. But we're not going to talk about it like it's some, fixed, concrete thing. Instead, we're going to look at it as a powerful, ever-changing idea, a story we all agree to believe in, a story that literally shapes the world around us. So let's explore how this one big idea has driven centuries of change.
So, let's just start with that huge question right there. Is money a fact of nature, like gravity? Or is it really just a collective story, something that only has power because billions of us agree it does? Getting your head around this is really the key to understanding everything else we're going to talk about.
And this quote from our source material really sets the stage perfectly. I mean, think about it. The things that feel so permanent and just normal to us today, our economic systems, the value of a dollar. History shows us that these things are often just a temporary phase. They're built on ideas that can and absolutely do change.
And that gets us to the absolute heart of this whole explainer. It's not the physical coins or the numbers on a screen that really drive history. Nope. It's the human belief systems behind them. Our values, our philosophies, those are the real engines of our economic world.
So here's the journey we're going to take. We'll start with how money is just an idea. Then we'll see how those ideas spark real-world actions. We'll look at the consequences of those actions, see how they give birth to brand new ideas, and finally, we'll land in the present day and ask, what's next?
So let's start at the very beginning, the battle of ideas. Because depending on your philosophy, you get a completely different kind of money and a completely different kind of world.
Okay, so check this out. This is fascinating because it kind of sets the stage for the massive conflicts of the 20th century. On one hand, you've got classical economics. The idea here is that money is a rational tool that follows these unbreakable, almost scientific laws. But then, on the other hand, you have something totally different. 19th century German Romanticism, which saw money as a tool for the spiritual perfection of a people, a way to build a better, more culturally pure nation. I mean, you can see how these two ideas are just on a collision course, right?
So how do these big, abstract philosophies actually leap off the page and into the real world? Well, this next part is all about how those ideas get turned into policy and how that policy shapes history. This idea that money's job is to serve some higher spiritual purpose, it wasn't just some dusty thought experiment. It directly led to a real-world policy of creating a closed, isolated state to protect German culture from what they saw as corrupting foreign influences. An idea literally became a physical border.
And you can see this pattern play out over and over again in the 20th century. The Great Depression gives birth to the idea of the New Deal. The government should spend money to save the economy. Then after the war, the dominant idea is Keynesianism. The government should actively manage demand. And then when inflation hits in the 70s, that gives way to the neoliberal idea of monetary freedom and individualism. Each time, the dominant idea of the era directly shaped policy.
Of course, for every action, there's a reaction, and that brings us to the next, often really dramatic stage of this cycle, the consequences. And let me tell you, they are rarely what the people who came up with the original ideas ever expected.
I mean, just take the Roaring '20s. A whole new set of ideas about buying on credit, about mass consumerism, about speculating on the stock market. It fueled this incredible boom. For the first time, regular people were getting into the market. It really felt like a new permanent era of prosperity was here. The party would never end.
And this number right here, 381, that's the dizzying, euphoric peak of that idea. That's the top of the roller coaster. The belief in endless growth was at an absolute all-time high.
And then, the consequence. The idea, stretched way too far, just snapped. The bubble burst, and the world plunged headfirst into the Great Depression. A direct, brutal, and devastating consequence of the actions that were driven by the ideas of the 20s.
And look, this isn't just ancient history that happened in black and white photos. After the 2008 financial crisis, the guy who is basically the high priest of free market ideology, former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan, made this absolutely stunning admission. He confessed that his core belief that rational self-interest would always prevent a catastrophe was flawed. It was a modern echo of the very same cycle. An idea drives action, and that action has unexpected, world-shaking consequences.
So what happens after the smoke clears from a crash? Well, the fallout forces a really painful reckoning. Society has to question its deepest beliefs and start searching for a new story, a new philosophy to guide it. And just like that, the cycle starts all over again.
So here it is, laid out as simply as possible. This is the engine of our monetary history. It's this recurring loop where our beliefs create our reality, that reality then creates consequences, and those consequences force us to come up with brand new beliefs. It just keeps on turning.
And you see this pattern like clockwork. The consequence of the Great Depression was the idea of government intervention. The consequence of 1970s inflation was the idea of free markets. And the consequence of the 2008 crash? A deep, deep mistrust of the financial elites and a huge surge in populism, an idea that basically argues money and power should be returned to the people.
So, all of these historical cycles have led us right here, to the present moment. They've created this dominant global money culture that we all live in. So, what does this world we've built actually look like? Well, the author of our source material points out a few key traits. First, this powerful work ethic, where the main point of a job is just to make money, sometimes totally disconnected from any other purpose. Second, our big shared goals as a society are almost always measured in monetary terms, right? A country's success gets boiled down to its GDP. And finally, and this one is huge, it's a culture of individual risk. We are each expected to navigate this tough global arena on our own, and we're held responsible for how it all turns out.
And according to the author, one of the really ugly features of our era is this dangerous twisting of capitalism called crony capitalism. This is not the free market you read about in textbooks. This is a system where the line between big money and state power gets incredibly blurry, where powerful private interests use their wealth to bend the rules for their own gain, which crushes real competition and destroys public trust.
So if our current system feels unstable, if cronyism is a real problem, and if people are starting to question the very foundations of our economy, it really begs the question, what's the next turn of the wheel? What's the next big idea going to be?
The central argument here is that our global money culture is, well, it's adrift. It's like a ship that's lost its philosophical anchor. It's become a powerful tool without a clear purpose, a system that's desperately searching for a new story to give it meaning and stability again. And that leaves us with this final, crucial question. If it really is true that our collective beliefs about money are what build our reality, if our stories become our economic systems, then the power to change things lies in the story we all choose to tell next. The only question is, what will that story be?